Good day, YouTube. Afternoon, everybody. So, I wanted to do a video here to remind everybody to reevaluate. My mind's been about reevaluating lately, I guess. Operate off the notion of Occam's razor often, of where you take two possibilities, whichever one is the easiest explained or the most likely is your most likely outcome. That's the probable answer. It's the always looking at that in a logical point of view, that whatever the most logical direct answer is probably the correct one. And with our current situation, I think you have to continue to evaluate that. Never want to assume that you're right, but in evaluating past evidence with current results and current evidence, I don't know how I couldn't continue to prepare, to see that a calamity is coming of some sort. The SHTF, if you will, is a likelihood, is a strong likely possibility in the foreseeable future. What is it that's really going to negate that? There's not really, we evaluate the possibilities, the information. It all looks still pointing in the same direction. Looking at some past articles and past information, and you have all the information and evidence that was before us in the 80s, and maybe not so much for me, but it's stuff that you look at. I looked at later down the road in the 90s. The transition to one world government, the establishment of the UN was well before my time, but as it moved forward, like its true nature and its true objectives, what was the fruits that came out of the UN? Was there anything other than just outright oppression and destruction of national sovereignty across the globe? Poverty seem to be the fruits of the UN's labor. And then you look at some of the predictions from the 90s and some of the things that were going on and some of the fears that were out there and the concerns. I wouldn't really put it as fears. Fears are often, fears just mean you're not ready to put action to counter it, really. But the concerns from the 90s of the UN overtaking the US, the UN suppressing the citizenry, the gun confiscation, gun control, all that stuff really starting to fester and boil up, and you had direct evidence of it. The Ruby Ridge and Waco government overreaches, and getting in bed with the UN on multiple fronts in other countries, and that evidence was all right there. And now we are, you transition into the 2000s, and we've got an ever-ending war, which we were warned about, that that would be used to placate the people. I don't think you can look at it any other way. It's not like we're making full strategic efforts to win or to accomplish goals. It's a continuation, no matter what standard you go by, I don't think. So all those things are continuing to play forward. So what is the end game? I don't think it's hard to deduct the end game. I don't want to predict. I don't want to assume that I know what the strategy is. So you just prepare for the worst. Would be my logical thought process. Is the corporate one world government planning to kill 7 billion people? Well, somebody said it. You can debate the mystery of the Georgia Guidestones, but it's in writing, so somebody wrote it and had it as an intention. You got tons of things like that still exist, that still stand, that until proven false, still seem to be on the agenda, still seem to be on the docket, if you will. The federalization of local police, ongoing as we speak in Chicago, pushes forward that centralized, UN takeover of the nation. Once your local police forces become, the standing military for foreign occupation, which is essentially what that could lead to, or will lead to, if you want to say it that way. What else is where is the good in the police working for people outside of their community? Yeah, there is none. And that's been a long-standing transition. So we're about 30 years into that movement when you look at the establishment of the LA SWAT and the militarization of police and the transition that has overtaken the police, I guess you'd say, since the violent movements of the 60s caused police to react in a certain way, to think that they needed that, and then they developed tactics and procedures and equipment, and you've basically got military on the streets. And what is the fruit that is being born out of that? Not a lot of trust, not a lot of confidence from people, and people who don't seem to work for them or respect their needs, because there's a lot of jumping the gun, if you will, literally going to the guns when it doesn't seem like it's necessary, or there is no effort made to dissuade and placate, and there's no effort to de-escalate situations anymore by a lot of police forces. It's not in their training anymore, it doesn't seem like. So keeping the peace of a peace officer seems to be going the way of the dodo bird in a lot of ways, causing much distrust. So you've got centralization of police, which become a militarized force in your neighborhoods, which follows the UN protocol, which lends itself to, if they are overrun or if they are incapacitated or not able to handle situations, who are they going to call? They want to call whatever assistance they can get, right? They're going to call for federalized support, which is what's happening in Chicago. So our dear leader and his appointed minion Sessions have sent in federal forces, essentially, to suppress the insurrection in Chicago. If you were to write this down, I mean, I guess the only thing different between it being a somewhat of an insurrection in Chicago is you don't know of a stated objective of all the killing and all the violence that's going on there, other than it being fomented by the socialists to bring about their desired outcome of a socialized welfare state. That's theory, so can't prove that yet. Can't say that that's the desired outcome, but it sure does seem like it. Trying to use that, again, just logical reasoning, A plus B equals C, right? Seems to me that the socialists get exactly what they want. They don't want to suppress the violence in Chicago just yet because they're not reached their desired end state. Once they get the end state desired of enough placating of the people and desire of the people to want the police state, then they can bring it in. And it's just step by step. So once this Chicago program goes off without fail and the feds have successfully countered this insurrection, they'll be asked for all over the country, right? And they'll be tons of money dumped in the name of security and to suppress sanctuary cities or whatever other term they're going to want to put on it. And it'll amazingly be going down in all these supposedly Democrat-controlled cities. See the nature of the lie, people. Use logical thought. When you put it all together, they're all working on it together. The D's and the R's. I mean, when you got a Republican administration supporting as far left-wing Democrat mayor as you can get as Rahm Emanuel in this nature, you can't help but conclude that this is the end game, or the next step, maybe not the end game. It's the next pawn move in advancing the ball down the field for them. Because nobody's opposing the administration because, supposedly they're on the R team. So if they're on the R team, I can't oppose them. And they're supporting somebody on the D team. Well, that's just because it's for law and order, right? Yeah, maybe not. On the far, in some of the issues with this, there's talk of these agents that there's going to be gun confiscation going on in Chicago, which I thought guns were illegal in Chicago, but anyway, that's neither here nor there, I guess. Gun control doesn't work, once again. Just putting all those things together, folks, and using that Occam's razor mindset, logical thought, that we continue to see the tyranny of the situation, and that what was predicted in the 80s or foretold by the communists and pushed forward in the 90s, and there was pushback on it in the 90s, and now we had a little bit of suppression of the anti-government, I guess you would say, people. I mean, for lack of a better word, the constitutional message was suppressed in the early 2000s, and it's being suppressed again. It got riled up pretty good in 07 and 08, and the constitutionalist message was getting out, and now they found their golden boy to let everybody go back to sleep so they can continue to advance the ball down the field to that one world government, police state control of everything. Your animal farm. It's using the enforcers as the buffer between the oligarchs and the people, who are going to get out of control if things continue. They're going to have that militarized police state to keep the people in check, because there are a lot more of people than there are the protectors. So they know they have to really make it robust and put it in place well before the people awake. And they hope none of because there's still, granted, you give them a hard time, but there's still people that are in the law enforcement community who are still going to resist that in the long run, as for right now. But the numbers are going to keep dwindling. The numbers are going to go down as they're more indoctrinated and more trained in that the militarized police is just in cause, because we're caught creating law and order, right? The people must be placated. They cannot be allowed to resist or show any resistance, because that'll just rile up more of the grasshoppers, or not the grasshoppers, the ants. What was that movie with the grasshoppers being the few? What was the name of that movie? Anyway, that was a good part of that kids movie. The grasshoppers realizing that they had to keep the ants down, thus they rise up because there's so many of them. Hard to believe that message is getting put out even in these days through a simple cartoon, when you have all the other counter stuff that's junk that gets put out in kids movies and shows and whatnot. So really, just A plus B equals C until proven false, right? So as the information we gather in the 80s and 90s continues to prove that, and the answer is still C in this day and age, how can you not still, you got to follow with your initial assessment, right? Your response, your prep, your planning, all remains on course. I don't see a need to change course. Anybody I think that does is being misled. Anybody who has put down their plan, who has put down their desire to free themselves of the perceived or apparent or obvious oppression and progression towards a one world situation is fooling themselves and has been fooled. The message cannot be softened. There's no need or no want, I don't think, by anybody to lessen that message, to cease warning people of the impending situation. So I would just recommend everybody to continue to highlight that with your peers, family members, anybody else that may be not convinced or has been convinced and is starting to sway in their determination. You might want to bring them back to the simple math that A plus B is equal in C still to this day, just as it was shown to us, and we have been led down this road. It doesn't appear to be changing, and it might be speeding up, just changing tactics, and the ball continues to get advanced down the field. So just a word, people: prepare, live free.